The SEGA Dreamcast, the first 128-bit system on the market, and the system to kick off arguably the greatest console generation ever. And despite only being on the market for 2 years and never reaching its full potential, there are some pretty impressive looking games out there. So today we're picking out my top 20 Dreamcast graphics. Now the criteria for this list isn't just about raw 3D polygons. I've tried to take into account visual design, artistry, atmosphere, artistic vision, and how well the game's held up today. Let's get started. So starting off with a couple of honourable mentions that didn't quite make the cut, and the first is Rayman 2. Now this may be a port of the Nintendo 64 game, but the Dreamcast version is the version to play, with higher resolution, smoother frame rate, and most importantly, higher quality textures, which for me make this the definitive version of the game, and the game the way it's meant to be played. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 blended beautiful 3D backgrounds with slick 2D sprite work and smooth animation. So why does this one miss out? Well, at times the effect can actually be quite jarring, and it isn't quite as seamless as I think it could be. Still, the game remains fantastic and is definitely a looker. Next up on the honourable mentions list is Crazy Taxi 1 and 2. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's smashing through parks in Crazy Taxi's San Francisco setting or driving through the vast NYC setting of Crazy Taxi 2. Both games look incredible and deserve a mention. So kicking off the top 20 is the frankly crazy Power Stone 2. Now, Capcom upped the ante in every single way with this one, with more playable characters on screen at once, crazy use of colour, and the most impressive thing to me is the changing arenas, which make this an eye-catching experience. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I have a soft spot for Hydro Thunder. It's one of my favourite games on the Dreamcast, and it gets number 19 on this list. The environments are big, varied and colourful, and the game is absolutely stunning to look at. Add to that the real smooth animation and motions, and I still find this game brilliant to play today. I don't think many games on the market have touched this one. So Hydro Thunder is at number 19. Number 18 is Skies of Arcadia, and the best way I can describe this game is like taking a classic 16-bit RPG with all of its sprite-based visual charm and then making the whole thing a 3D experience. The Dreamcast benefited from more VRAM and an impressive GPU features like tiled rendering and super sample aliasing compared to the PS2, and it was these better textures and image quality that really shines through with Skies of Arcadia, making it a fully realised, charming world. All of the characters have personality, just like sprite-based 16-bit games, and this is something that's really hard to portray in early 3D games, but Skies of Arcadia smashed it. So Skies of Arcadia is at number 18. Ferrari F355 was Yu Suzuki's love letter to the Italian prancing horse, and whilst the visuals lack a little bit of variation, what they do extremely well. The car model in particular is incredible, and all the tracks and lighting effects are rendered beautifully. Like I say, this is a one-trick pony, or horse, forgive the pun, but the execution is fantastic, and the game and the models still look great 20 years later. Now, people may be surprised by my number 16 choice, but Virtua Tennis 2 was an upgrade in every single way to the first game, which was already a head-turner in the arcades. Gone were the sunken-eyed, strangely proportioned models of the first game, and in came more detailed models with more frames of animation and a smoother frame rate. The level of detail on the courts was also massively improved. So whilst the game of tennis may not offer much in terms of visual variety, what this game did do, it did extremely well, and it's still a great looking game today.
Love 30.
It's a real shame that Guilty Gear X was only released in Japan on the Dreamcast because the game had some of the best 2D visuals out there. You can quite literally freeze the game at any point and it looks like an exquisitely hand-drawn work of art. If you are a 2D fighting fan and haven't found this series yet, you are in for a real treat, and it's at number 15 on the best looking Dreamcast games. Now, Phantasy Star Online was a special game in terms of technical achievement. Prior to this, console games simply had online elements or leaderboards, and Phantasy Star brought a Diablo-like experience to console. Now, what made this so beautiful was the world and design aesthetic that really shines through. Every enemy seemed to be lovingly crafted, and with the set-piece huge bosses bringing a genuine jaw-dropping highlight. There was a phenomenal musical score as well, which actually, for me, made the visuals feel more vibrant and helped with creating that atmosphere within the game. So Phantasy Star Online is, whilst it may not be technically the best of visuals out there, it's one of my favourite looking, feeling worlds on the Dreamcast, and it's at number 14. At number 13, we have Res, and who knew that wireframe visuals could look so good? Res, put simply, is art with kaleidoscopic colour literally bursting out of the screen as you play. The simplicity of the visuals means that they still look great today. So much so that Res has been re-released multiple times and is one of the most popular VR games that you can play. Res is a stunning game. If you haven't played it, definitely try and pick this one up at number 13. Test Drive Le Mans is a beautiful game, from the fantastic car models to the track detail and textures, but the biggest wow factor here is definitely the lighting. The amazing real-time changing light conditions to the excellent headlight effects. All of this at a rock-solid 30 frames per second. It's beautiful to see even today, especially with the Dreamcast's VGA output. That's why Test Drive Le Mans is at number 12. At number 11, we have Headhunter. Now, the gameplay nowadays may need a little to get used to, but there is no denying that Headhunter is a great looking game on the Dreamcast. Whilst the open world can look a little sparse, the interiors are gloriously detailed, so much so that there were question marks sometimes whether I was looking at pre-rendered visuals. Sadly, this game only released in Europe because it came out so late in the Dreamcast's life cycle, but it's still one of the best looking Dreamcast games at number 11. Into the top 10 now, and Resident Evil Code Veronica is easily one of the best games on the Dreamcast. Thanks to the power of the Dreamcast, it was the series' first move away from your classic pre-rendered backgrounds, and Capcom seriously delivered with stunningly detailed 3D characters, roaming camera viewpoints, and spectacular atmospheric lighting effects that greatly enhanced the cinematic feel of the game. The high production values and sheer quality of the visuals here mean you would be forgiven for thinking these are pre-rendered visuals. It's one of the best in the series, and I cannot wait for a remake, but even if that never happens, the game here looks glorious.
Chris Redfield. Is he a relative of yours or something?
At number 9 we have yet another Japanese-only release in the name of Ikaruga. Put simply, Ikaruga remains one of the best-looking shmups of all time, with breathtaking sweeping camera shots and excellent 3D models, all never slowing down no matter how much you have on the screen at once. It truly is a beautiful game and a real example of just how design can... It really is a beautiful game and is another example of how the design of a game can actually trump just pure 3D polygon pushing, because it looks phenomenal. So my number 8 pick needs no introduction. The story is legendary. Namco took their game Soul Calibur and made a vastly superior version over the arcade version for the Dreamcast, with better high-res models, better lighting, better shadows, more detail. If you have a look here, I've got this clip from Digital Foundry which basically shows just how much more detail there was in the Dreamcast version. And what's even more staggering is this took just 7 months to fully rewrite for the Dreamcast's more powerful hardware. The game runs at a glorious 60 frames per second and never really misses the beat, and it's still one of the best 3D fighters that you can play all these years later. Soul Calibur is at number 8. At number 7 is the sequel to the Dreamcast's best-selling game Sonic Adventure, and Sonic Adventure 2 just upped the ante in every single way. Sonic Adventure, of course, was a launch title, a first-generation title. The sequel, they had learned so much. Sonic's model was so much more detailed, the environments and textures had so much more going for them. As a game, they trimmed a lot of the additional unwanted sections and just focused on Sonic, Tails and Knuckles. And the result is phenomenal. It really looks great on the Dreamcast and really is a testimony to the hardware. The Knuckles sections in particular have huge scope and so much detail to them that you can just keep going through and really marvel at what they were able to achieve here on the Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure 2 is at number 7. Number 6 is Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future, and this was the franchise's first foray into 3D, a follow-up to the Mega Drive game and its sequel, and it now has a fully realized 3D, drop-dead gorgeous adventure world. You can literally just swim around here. It's so therapeutic, the detail is fantastic, and it's addictive just swimming around looking at the undersea detail. It's really remarkable, and even just cruising around a tranquil coral reef looks extremely impressive. The whole shimmering rocks, fine sand, stone formations and texturing, you name it, it looks great, almost photorealistic at times, and there's tons of gorgeous underwater architecture which shimmers with a water effect that really looks fantastic. Echo the Dolphin is at number 6. At number 5 is another game that needs absolutely no introduction. Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio, depending on your location, looks absolutely glorious. Sega went fully cel shaded for this, and the style of the game fit with the incredible soundtrack and really fresh, fun gameplay. The whole game just works, and because of the unique cel shaded style, it still holds up today. There have been many imitators and many games that have used the effect since, but Jet Set Radio really was the first game to use cel shading for the entire 3D environment, and the result was an absolute triumph. Like I say, it still looks good to this day. It did get a sequel on the Xbox, but it's such a shame that they haven't made any more of these games since. If Sega's listening in any way, they should definitely make a sequel. Jet Set Radio is at number 5. The House of the Dead 2 was a sequel to the already fantastic looking Sega Model 2 game House of the Dead, and this one ran on Naomi hardware, so the conversion to the Dreamcast was reasonably easy, but it still is jaw-dropping. The frame rate is superb, the architecture of all of the Gothic buildings just really fits with a fantastic aesthetic, and all of the texture work is extremely good. You can't help but play this game. Even today, this is so much fun to play, so much fun to experience. And I think, each House of the Dead game took a huge step over its predecessor. 3 was much better than 2, 2 looked a lot better than 1, and I think that's how the series has managed to stay so fresh. It's always been a big jump, but you can see here the texture work and the visuals are really stunning, really clean. House of the Dead 2 is at number 4. So my favourite Dreamcast racing game, MSR, is at number 3, and this was an incredible technical feat. The developer's bizarre creation took around 30,000 photos of London, Tokyo, San Francisco, and painstakingly recreated it. You can see here it still looks good to this day, and there's no other way that you could get to drive the London streets today without huge congestion, certainly not at these speeds. It was breathtaking back then to see it, and to be honest, even now, the amount of craftsmanship and care that the team painstakingly put in to create these graphics still shines through, particularly in London, an area I know extremely well. Everything is still very, very recognizable. It's a real shame that obviously the Project Gotham series that was the spiritual successor to this has now stopped. But if you've never checked out MSR, it's still a beautiful game, and if you use the Dreamcast's VGA output, it still looks incredibly good. MSR starts our top 3. Dead or Alive 2 is at number 2, and I have to say this game looks stunning. It uses a lot more polygons. They say around 2 million polygons. To give you an idea, Soul Calibur uses around 1 million polygons. The environments are incredible, highly detailed, and the ability to smash your opponent through them, off edges, etc. just really, really highlights how phenomenal and grand these environments are. I remember being completely obsessed with this game. The colors and the visual design is extremely impressive. And in fact, with the Dreamcast's VGA output, the other thing I love about this is just how clean everything looks. All of the edges, everything just looks really, really good. If you play the PS2 version, there's loads of jaggies and the image quality just isn't there. Whereas the Dreamcast version of Dead or Alive 2 is absolutely spot on. It just misses out on the top spot, but even today, for me, this is the best entry in the whole Dead or Alive series. You should definitely check this one out. So, on to my number 1 pick, and was it really going to be anything else? Shenmue, for me, was just astounding. It's a game that influenced my life. It's a game that I look back on with huge amounts of fondness. And like MSR, where they took 30,000 photos, Shenmue was a reproduction of Yokosuka and various other areas in the region, and when you see the photos and the comparison, you can just see the whole thing was a labor of love, and they thought about everything. You walk around Rio's home, you open a drawer, you'll see knives and forks. You can pick things up, everything is completely interactive and really, really glorious. Not to mention the weather scheme and lighting effects, which are extremely good. And then there's the full, although it's not related to the graphics, the orchestral score, which just emphasizes and raises the whole thing up to me. This game is incredibly special and just blew my mind all those years ago. Yes, the controls don't hold up, but the game is something I think anybody should absolutely experience. Shenmue is my #1 pick. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, like and subscribe, that really helps me out, and have a great day.
Think she's hungry?